Howdy ho! I'm releasing this podcast a day early because on January 8th, when the podcast is due, I'll be en route to Sweden to see my fiancée Natty. We've been together 5 years now. We see each other once a year or so. This time, it's only been half a year since we last saw each other, and I'm going to be there for 2 months. It's going to be so much fun, and she's going to co-host my podcast with me for the 8 weeks that I'll be there. As we're rotating segments once again, we begin this week's podcast in Droon, Book 7, Into the Land of the Lost. God, this one's good. Remember how much I made fun of the first book? Only 1 year and 7 tiny books in, this series has already matured so much, and it matures plenty more later on. 1. A Friend in Trouble. The book opens with Julie and Neil coming over to see Eric, who's working on fixing the sink with his dad. Julie and Neil show off their new possessions. Julie got a little red fox for her charm bracelet because it reminds her of Badamogi, and Neil got bright red socks, which he calls his nin socks. Unbelievably, these are both Chekhov's guns, as is the fact that Eric, for absolutely no reason, urges Neil not to lose his socks in Droon in order to remind readers of the rule, unmentioned since the first book, about leaving upper world objects in Droon or vice versa. Due to Mr. Hinkle foolishly following Neil's advice, the pipe explodes and water gets everywhere, and the kids run downstairs to get towels and a wrench. Another thing happens that hasn't since the first book. Kia sends a message via the soccer ball. We get a very brief moment that's from Neil's perspective instead of Eric's. Weird. And the backwards message reads, Spar seeks the golden wasp. Help me. Help Droon. They go to Droon, knowing they'll be back before Eric's dad misses them. Lots of reminders of stuff that hasn't been relevant since the first book. This time, the rainbow stairs take them to a rocky plain where Spar astride a Groggle, I'm all tongue-tied, is attacking Kia and Max. 2. Under Spar's spell. Ooh-whoa, ooh-whoa. If you get that? No? Okay. Spar has acquired a magic orb. Doesn't have a name or anything, it's just a magic orb, a black glass ball with many arcane etchings, which hypnotizes Kia into telling him that the wasp is an Agravur. Spar takes Hypno-Kia with him on his quest to take the wasp from there. He unleashes a horde of magic snakes all over Droon. Galen appears and says it's Max and the trio who must go to Agravur while he deals with the snakes. He warns them that they must leave Agravur by midnight or they will become ghosts too, and he gives them 2 magic items, an hourglass that will unerringly tell them when to leave Agravur, and a magic mirror they can use only once to contact him. And he takes them to the Bridge of Mists, the fastest path to Agravur. 3. Bridge of Mists. So they cross the Bridge of Mists, so named because it's real foggy. They find a boat, which magically takes them across an underground lake. They see that Agravur is underneath the surface of the lake, and are attacked by Nins who sink the boat. 4. Thief of Agravur. They float gently through the air beneath the surface of the water. That's some pretty surreal imagery, not bad at all. Here they meet Shago, the thief of Agravur, a man who resembles a monkey with the face of a rat. He initially tries to steal their stuff, but relents when he finds out they were sent by Galen, and decides to take them to see Queen Hazad, ruler of Agravur. The Nins finally figure out they can just follow the kids into the lake, so Shago leads them into the city, walking right through a wall. 5. The Ghost Queen. Shago, as it turns out, is not a ghost. He just used a spell to walk through the wall, and it would have allowed the kids to follow him had they not been too stunned to do so. I'm sorry about the dishwasher, it's bad timing, I know. Shago, he instead lifts them over the city wall with his magic rope. Shago spends most of his time in Agravur because his entire family are among the great heroes who live posthumously in the city. The only proper entrance to the city is the Gate of Life, which will open when Droon is at peace, and the heroes of Droon will live again. The heroes themselves look awfully lively and colorful for being ghosts, but Shago says that every day, though they start like this, they begin to lose hope that Droon will be at peace, and their color and strength start to fade. Queen Hazad is an elderly woman wearing a knobbled wooden crown and walking with a cane, and she welcomes the children. The queen rounds up the guards to fight back against the invading Nins. Hazad describes the golden wasp as a cursed thing with a sting that can turn love to hate, beauty to ugliness, life to death. Damn, this series is well written. Really great standards for kids. I love it. Hazad explains that she once fought Spar for the Wasp, lost her life in the attempt, but was able to take the Wasp with her to Agravur. 6 Walls of Terror. Spar breaches the walls and brings Kia to the center of the city. He's unable to harm anyone in the city. Has that been adequately explained? I don't recall. But he can still trap Kia in the city, so she becomes a ghost at midnight. He unhypnotizes her, then uses the magic orb to trap her inside a huge maze. The Nins start tearing the city apart. 7 In the Mind's Eye. Eric has a weird feeling like he's seen the maze before, and realizes it was when Spar blasted him in the face with the orb. The maze's path is etched on the orb's surface. They use the mirror to call Galen, who casts a spell on Eric to unlock the memory of the maze's every detail. Eric leads the way into the maze, and after what feels like hours, they find Kia, and then find their way back out easily. The ghosts have lost their hope, now looking colorless and smoky, and have lost the strength to fight back against the Nins. Queen Hazad reminds Spar that no living soul can harm the ghosts of Agravur, and Spar says he's thought of that, having his Nins bring forth a box containing the title of Chapter 8, The Warriors of the Scorth. These guys are an army of skeleton warriors whose only purpose is to destroy. Spar sets them loose and sets his magic orb to put all the citizens of Agravur into a trance. The kids find Shago, who fled from the battle, believing himself a thief rather than a warrior or a hero. Shago distracts Spar while Eric uses the magic rope to fly up to the orb and smash it with Queen Hazad's walking stick. Spar isn't too upset as he recognizes the cane and transforms it back into the golden wasp. Spar uses a gauntlet to catch the wasp, perhaps the same gauntlet he used to contain the Eye of Dawn, that's a nice parallel, and shoves it into a sack. He and the Nins depart, leaving the Scorth to destroy all the ghosts. 9. Against the Gate of Life. Queen Hazad commands her warriors to fight the Scorth, and they cry out their old battle cry, "For Droon!" Shago leads the kids to the enormous Gate of Life, and the Scorth pursue, the battle breaking some of the water pipes that feed the fountain at the town center. Neil has an idea, and stuffs his socks into the pipe until the pressure builds up and a blast of water makes the Scorth fall to pieces. 10. Goodbye to Agravur. The ghosts gain back their hope and their color, which gives them the strength to open the Gate of Life to release the kids, Max, and Shago with only minutes to spare. Shago gives back Julie's charm bracelet, which he stole from her without her notice back when they first met, and Neil's socks. Taking a tunnel back to the world of the living, they meet up with Galen, give back the hourglass in the mirror, so all loose ends are tied up for today, but another battle is on the way, as Spar has the wasp. The kids ascend the rainbow stairs, grabbing the wrench for Eric's dad, but Julie suddenly realizes that the charm bracelet Shago gave her isn't hers, as it has a blue fox on it instead of red. They realize they've accidentally brought something from Droon back to the upper world, and, as promised, something from the upper world disappears and ends up somewhere in Droon, namely, Eric's dad. The kids race to Droon to set things right, but not before the blue fox charm begins to growl. And so the book ends on a cliffhanger. Nice! So like I said at the beginning, man, this was a good book. This series has so much depth to it, you really ought to read it sometime. Let's talk adaptation. We meet 2 new major characters, the more prominent of the 2 being Shago. I think he's too thin of physique to be a suit performer, so we have to figure out how to realize him with a puppet. As a kid, I imagined him being much smaller than a human, so it would fit, if he was just a Muppet. And for his voice, I choose Maurice LaMarche, being very suave and smooth. I am Shago, thief of Agravur. That didn't sound like Maurice LaMarche, but anyway. I imagine the heroes of Droon being all sorts of creatures, lots of cool and unique designs for suit performers, puppets, some of them humans with makeup, all sorts of practical ways to realize the heroes of Droon. And in the role of the less recurring Queen Hazad, I'm going to go with another voice actor playing a live-action role, Russi Taylor. The warriors of the Scorth, of course, must be depicted with stop motion. Classic, iconic Ray Harryhausen stuff, that is. The golden wasp, described as a wasp made entirely of gold and 6 inches long, ought to be depicted with CGI. We avoid CGI in Droon when we can, but not completely. We save it for the really cool stuff. Special effects are a tool. And that's it for Droon. Now, Keys and Kingdoms. I've been designing a rule book, just one little chapter at a time. Getting through it. Anything I said before about levels and challenge rating, scrap that. I get challenge ratings now. I totally understand it. Where was I? Yeah, 5th edition, there's a good reason it's incredibly popular. I'm just gonna fucking do it. Keys and Kingdoms is basically just 5th edition, because that's legal. I'll do everything I can to add new shit to it. But first, I figure I'm just gonna, build a rulebook that's just straight up the 5th edition rulebook, just with a couple of tweaks added to it, and then I'm gonna go back through all the notes I've had on the Disney films and just add those a piece at a time. Today, we're watching the 3rd film of the package era, and the 9th in my collection as a whole, Make Mine Music. Never seen it, or any of its segments as far as I know. As I understand it, it's a bunch of musical segments, not unlike Fantasia. So that'll be interesting, something completely new. Also released in 1946 was Song of the South, the only live-action film and the only actual feature of this era of my collection. Okay, unclench everybody. Yes, it's a film which hasn't been released in North America since before home video was invented because, well, it was the 40s and they were trying to write black characters. I think that's the extent of it, really. I mean, most Warner Brothers cartoons of the same area were many times more racist and they got DVD releases for collectors, but, I mean, I'm not defending it. It was still white people in the 40s trying to write black characters. I'd wager it's a little bit uncomfortable at the bare minimum. I will take this moment to dispel the one big misconception people have about Song of the South. It is set after the abolition of slavery, so the many African-American plantation workers we see in the film are not slaves. They almost certainly used to be, but they're not anymore, just to clear that up. Maybe that makes it better, but what do I know? It's history. History is unpleasant. History is not something to be proud of, but it exists. And Disney, though they sugarcoat the hell out of it, they do depict history. They don't ignore it outright like a lot of other kids' media does, and I admire them for that. Since a copy is outside my reach and I'm not ready to be a pirate just yet, we're going to watch the Cinema Snobs review of it and call that a viewing of the film. So I'll be right back with Jeremy with Make Mine Music and Song of the South. Okay, and we're back. Here's Jeremy.
Hello.
Okay, and we've just seen Make Mine Music and Song of the South, or at least a Cinema Snob review of Song of the South. And so here's our notes. So first, Jeremy wondered why all the voices of the choirs, every one of these films during the opening credits, they have a choir singing something, and the choir always sounds really drowned out. I guess that was just the best way they could record a choir back then. Not so cleanly. This film has 5 directors, and I've noticed most of the films have a whole lot of directors so far. I mean, nowadays films have 2 directors tops, but I guess back then you needed a few people to keep track of all the animation. The first segment of Make Mine Music is the Martins and the Coys, sort of a Hatfields and McCoy story, which was cut from the film for home video release because of gunplay, and so we did not see it. So let's not talk about that. Second segment was Blue Bayou, just some cranes flying around. Very dull.
Very boring.
Yeah. And then third segment was All the Cats Join In. It's about teenagers, just going to a malt shop, listening to the jukebox, dancing around, I thought it would be about actual cats. But apparently, just back then, it's called Cool People Cats. Like nowadays we go, hey, look at that dude. But back then it was like, hey, check out this cat. Stuff like that. And, and so like some other segment that it slips my mind which one, the whole thing was being drawn as the action was going on. And it just struck me as very 50s, even though this was 1946. A lot of the stuff that we saw, the outfits and the culture, it looked very much like, what we remember of the 50s, except it was jazz instead of early rock and roll.
Yeah.
Then the segment was called Without You. It was a really boring segment. I'm just not an artsy type. I don't like watching abstract imagery. I like my animated segments to be animated.
Normal.
Animated. Okay, then there was Casey at the Bat, about a baseball player named Casey. It was not boring, but not really enjoyable either.
It was kind of like average animation almost.
Yeah, very.
Like average entertainment wise.
Yeah,
kinda.
it was very average. I think every good D&D campaign has mini games where the characters go out gambling or something, and I've thought of like bowling and tennis and golf mini games for my own D&D game. Maybe Keys and Kingdoms can have a baseball mini game.
Yes.
And then there was 2 silhouettes, so it seems we've established a pattern. We have an exciting segment, then a boring one, then an exciting one, then a boring one, just in that order all the time. And this one, at least, it was a boring one. It was visually interesting with these 2 rotoscope silhouettes of ballet dancers doing their thing. And then we have probably the best-known segment, the Peter and the Wolf segment from the Prokofiev Ballet, narrated by Sterling Holloway. I know I mention Sterling Holloway every time he comes up, but I can't help it. He's cute. He's got a cute voice. And I saw. Yeah. Oh, I'm Winnie the Pooh. And I can't do Sterling Holloway.
This is a good guy. Neither can I.
Yeah, nobody can except for Jim Cummings, who took over all his characters
He
after
was
he
trained.
died. Yeah, he trained for it. It's what made him famous. Yeah.
This man has never tried that.
Good coffee. Okay, so I did see this segment in kindergarten. I saw the Peter and the Wolf segment. I like how at the beginning, they explain how each character is linked to one of the instruments in the ballet or suite or whatever it was. I found the narrator kind of unnecessary, I mean, I think they could have just told the story with just the music and the animation. They didn't need Holloway there talking. And, okay, and some good Russian motifs for,
Yeah, they spelled wolf in Russian.
Yeah, there's wolf in Russian. There was a sign on the lake that was in Russian. And so, yeah, just the cultural motifs of the outfits and the houses. And, I like seeing all the cultural motifs. It's kind of the big draw of Disney for me in designing this role-playing game. Don't take the bird away from the dog.
He wants me to play with him, but he's mad at me for playing with him.
Yeah, it's a game.
Sorry for the dog noises.
Yes, we're just doing a little tug of war with him. Jeremy gave him a bird, and he likes playing with it, and now I'm trying to take it from him, but I can't.
Oh my god, it's flying.
Yep. Okay, and then the next segment was called After You're Gone, and it was just a bunch of dancing instruments. It was kind of cool, nothing special. And then there was Johnny Fedora and Alice Bluebonnet.
That was my favorite one. That one's really good.
Yeah, I liked it. It was a song sung by the Andrews sisters about 2 hats who fall in love. Yeah, it was nice. And then finally we have The Whale Who Wanted to Sing at the Met, an opera performed by Nelson Eddy, just playing every character in the shore, doing all the different vocals, and that was very impressive. Sort of a Mel Blankian feat. And I don't like the design of the whale. He's just too square, and the placement of his mouth is weird. Not a very appealing character design, in my opinion. Yeah. But, and the first song we hear him sing is Shortening Bread, which, it's a weird song to be performed in opera. I don't know, I've never heard it sung that way. It's kind of a weird choice. And I definitely loved him in Mephistopheles. Just the big bass voice that he does, and just, a whale dressed as the devil. That was really cool. And of course, it is a tragedy because it's an opera, so sad ending.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just had a New Year's party, and you've just deafened our listeners once again.
Sorry. So evil.
Okay, and then we come to Song of the South. So, just a couple of thoughts. We watched the Cinema Snob review, Song of the South, and well, a few thoughts. I never realized before I saw reviews of this film, I never realized that tar baby was a racial slur. I mean, I'd heard these stories as a kid from books and such, and to me, when I hear the word tar baby, I think the actual baby made of tar that Brer Fox makes to trick Brer Rabbit. But I guess it's just something people say, which makes a lot of sense that it became a racial slur. So, yeah, not cool. Okay. Except that James Baskett as Uncle Remus, he delivers a brilliant performance, even though his dialogue is questionable. He won an honorary Oscar for the role, which sounds like an even bigger honor than a regular Oscar, because they just you don't get nominated, they just give it to you. So the kid The main kid in this film was Bobby Driscoll, who would later go on to star in Treasure Island and be the voice of Peter Pan and die very young, presumably due to the drug and alcohol addiction that plagues most former child actors. So, Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear, they're still around to this day, even though this film is trying to be forgotten about. They're, the icons of the Disney ride Splash Mountain. Good templates for Keys and Kingdom's native characters. And so, in conclusion, the vernacular of the characters is pretty racist. I'd say it's way less racist than the minstrel shows of the time that this movie is accused of being. So, I think it's a harmless movie. Maybe they just didn't bother to re-release it because it's just not a very good movie. Maybe it's just kind of mediocre.
Kind of quality. It doesn't have good quality.
Yeah, it's pretty mediocre. Yeah, so, there we go. Any other thoughts?
I don't think so.
On either movie? No? Okay.
Oh, well, Johnny was really strange.
Johnny
Johnny the guy.
The kid from Song of the South. Yeah, his acting was really weird. He made weird faces. Yeah. and he wore weird outfits. Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, let's hope Bobby Driscoll got better because I channeled Porky Pig for a moment there. That's not Disney. So let's hope Bobby Driscoll got better at acting because he was the star of Treasure Island, which I'm gonna be watching in a couple of weeks with Natty. So.
Me?
Because I'm going to Sweden for 8 weeks and I want to keep doing the podcast.
Why? You have to leave.
I'll be back.
Oh, you will, good.
Yeah. Well, briefly, then I'm going to go to Rachel's to work at the restaurant, but, I know you're going to miss me. I know you love me so much.
I don't know. Lick my face, dog.
So Hermes is kind of hanging upside down, and Wiley is sniffing her.
He's stinky.
He is. He's got bad breath. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for the segment, Hermes. You go off and do your own thing now, while I still have to. Bye, and I still have to write the scripts for the next couple segments. So, bye-bye. And I'm back with further thoughts. Ultimately, I think Song of the South should get a home video release for collectors and film and animation historians, just to make it clear that it's for that demographic and not for your kids. I mean, Warner Brothers released all their super racist cartoons, just with disclaimers that the prejudice displayed is not cool and never will be cool, so Disney ought to have the balls to do the same, and again, this film is way more harmless than most depictions of the time, and keeping it banned will just make people want to try to find it, so yeah, releasing it with disclaimers that it's not okay is the way to go. That's just my take on it. Okay? That was a little bit heavy, but in a weird sort of way, it leads us nicely into this week's Companions segment. In Act 1, Scene 7, the companions camp out in the forest outside Silvery Moon, deciding where to go next. Caddybree and Wolfgar try to comfort Dritz about being rejected at the gates. At one point, Caddybree says, "Look at me when I'm talking to you, Dord." And if this whole thing plays out right, this is the only time in the entire play that the very socially withdrawn Dritz actually looks at the person he's speaking with. So everyone goes off stage to sleep for the night, and Dritz keeps watch. There, he is met by Lady Illustrial, a magnificent silver-haired elf woman who wants to come down to apologize to Dritz and explain why it is that she had him turned away. Dritz says she doesn't have to explain anything. He gets it. He goes like, "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" Let me take a moment to go off on a tangent. Didn't realize that I'd be doing this scene the same day I did Song of the South. Lots of racial themes this week. So drow in Dungeons & Dragons are depicted with red eyes, white hair, and black skin. Not black like a human, but literally black skin. And there are stupid idiots out there who think that drow are D&D's equivalent of black people, but those people are stupid idiots. There are actual black people in D&D. Drow are based on the dark elves of Viking mythology. No, I mean, this misconception isn't helped by the fact that in the Dritz books, Dritz has to deal with a lot of prejudice due to his race and the color of his skin, but he's very much a fantasy race. I don't see there being much of a parallel to any real-world racial issues. His issue is that he's the only known member of his race who isn't evil. That really doesn't fit any real-life situation. That being said, drow in my play will be depicted with dark purple skin, because black stage makeup is not okay in any context. That goes for cosplay as well. Cosplayers, if you're going to be a drow, go purple or blue or gray, not black. Be fucking civilized, won't you? I hope to have both white and black actors playing both drow and non-drow in the play, or at least the Dritz trilogy that I hope to make. Okay, done with the heavy stuff. Now back to the funny, the lighthearted joke about drow being black. Illustrial says that even though the realms aren't ready for Dritz Steward yet, she believes, and has to believe, that they will be someday. And someday every drow will be a ranger, which Dritz finds unlikely. So Illustrial launches into a song. Again, don't have a tune for this one, but I imagine it starts out very ethereal and Celtic, like a Lorena McKennitt or Enya song. Then it starts sounding like some band, I'm blanking on the band's name, the band from Jersey Boys. So Illustrial goes, "Perhaps you know Dove, she's my sister whom I love. You once knew each other from afar. Like you, she's a ranger, but to her you're still a stranger. She couldn't really tell me who you are. My sister Storm is a bard so sweet and warm. She likes collecting stories about you. She's always singing tales of your victories and fails, but she doesn't know how much of it is true." And the title of the song is Tell Me Who You Are, Illustrial interrogating Dritz about who he truly is, and the bulk of it is a patter song. I've got the rhythm of it more or less down, even though there's no melody. "Tell me how you fight through the night, blades moving at the speed of light, yet your flesh barely dented. Tell me how a drow is up here now, cause holy cow, the things no one could bestow must be unprecedented. Your purple eyes that hypnotize are a surprise when all your brethren's eyes are red. Is it just because they're evil? Are you an elf who loves himself, or is your self-esteem a twisted rune of wreckage long forgotten by the people?" I'm so marble mouth. I can't do a patter song, but I could write one. I'm proud of it. I'm quite proud of it. And Dritz has an answer to who he is, also told in song. You'll hear about that when I make the real play. Illustrial gives Dritz some gifts, rather than the gifts Illustrial gave Dritz in the books. She gives him all the stuff that Galadriel gave to the Fellowship in The Lord of the Rings, and Dritz is all like, "Hey, wait a minute," as he picks up on it. And when Illustrial says, "Hey, the entire framework of our existence has a certain heritage, as much as Mr. Gygax would have tried to deny it, it would be a shame not to acknowledge it." Dogs, there's nothing there, quit barking. So Dritz and Illustrial part on friendly terms, all is forgiven, and Illustrial asks him what the future holds, and Dritz says, "I honestly don't know, eh? When writing this show, I only read the first 10 Dritz books for research," which isn't exactly true, but it's funny. And there we go. Scene ends. And now we come upon the 7th and final Team Salmon idea, page turners. An idea I was musing about roughly 2 years ago, mentioned it to Natty, and she got so excited about the idea that I felt I just had to develop it. It's the only idea I have for a genuine kids show, something for kids, inspired by the live-action kid power stuff of the 80s and 90s. The art style, 2D animation, a bit anime-esque, probably Natty's art style. She draws better than I do. And, screw it, I'm just going to read the first episode summary straight out of my blog, ad-libbing something if I have any thoughts, and then I'm going to delete my blog, because I have nothing to say there anymore. Once I summarize page turners, I'll have said everything on my blog, on the podcast. The podcast is my blog now, so I will now read my blog entry to you. Okay, I have not prepared this. I just copied the blog entry onto my script. Have not prepared it, so now I'm just going to read it. We open on a street full of adult extras, all of them dark-haired. A teen girl narrator says, "Let's play a game." Yeah, a game. How about a quick round of Spot the Main Character? Cue a girl with incredibly long, fire truck red hair running through the crowd. This is our narrator, Lucy Lopez, who further explains that she's running late for school but isn't too fussed about it. She watches a lot of anime and knows that all the greatest things happen when one is late for something. She only wishes she'd had time to eat her toast. At school, she sits in the back near the window. There's no school uniform because it's an American school, but everyone around her is still fairly drab. Everyone but Kenji Matsuda, who comes in even later than Lucy, a tall, brooding boy with dark blue hair and a ponytail. Lucy's narration fawns over him a bit, denying her own nagging thoughts that she might be idealizing him purely because he's Japanese. Later, we come upon a few third graders over at the elementary school getting ready to leave as the school day ends. Kenji's little brother Gavin, who has a pastel orange faux hawk and is fiddling with a lot of gadgets, and aims to impress Piper Silverman, a heavily freckled girl with curly white hair and a lot of makeup. In the background is Holly Ford, who has pink hair and a bob haircut, but she's not focused on yet in this scene, merely standing out in the background. After school, all 5 of them find themselves in the public library, each waiting to get picked up later. The librarian, a golden-haired, middle-aged woman named Miss Chenoweth, looks over the 5 kids and wonders if they're together. Holly says, "No, why?" Miss Chenoweth shrugs. And it's Holly who first encounters the book. A dusty, all-black volume with no title, and very thick, looking to be exactly 1,000 pages long. She opens to a random page and finds a version of Snow White. As Holly reads it, she looks increasingly horrified by how dark the story is, as well as the fact that the text is zipping by, the entire story fitting into a single page topped by a gruesome illustration. As she finishes the story, the book glows with black magical energy, and Chenoweth comes up behind Holly and slams the book shut. "Where did you find that?" Commercial break cliffhanger. And we continue. I'm not entirely sure how. I know that the characters of the grimdark Snow White story come to life somewhere in the town and enact their story. That's the main point, and a few other things need to happen, but I'm not sure of the order of things and what comes in between them. The kids get a lot of exposition from Chenoweth, who reveals herself to be a fairy and unveils her 2 tiny pixie companions, Nyx and Snowdrop. The book needs a name and a bit of a history. The main point is that it contains every story ever told. It's pure evil right now, and the kids need to go and subdue the characters in order to turn the Snow White page back to good, so that at least that page can be used for a good purpose. There's also something cloaked in shadow that pursues them and wants the book for itself. Even though I intend the show to be appropriate for kids, I don't want to pull any punches with the grim dark versions of each fairy tale. A few ways I want to do that in the Snow White episode include the 7 dwarfs being identical to each other and very creepy, with Nyx pointing out that the notion of them having 7 distinct kooky personalities was the invention of one Walter Elias Disney. Also, Snow White is 7 years old, which not only ups the queen's villainy, but also the prince's. Holly reads a passage that tells of how the prince saw Snow White in her death-like sleep and found her so fair that he wanted to keep her for himself, and the kids are immediately filled with horror about what sort of man would think that about a 7-year-old. We'll leave the implications at that. The prince, therefore, ends up being something of the endgame villain of the episode, with Kenji having to beat him in a sword fight. Kids, as Don Bluth says, can handle anything as long as there's a happy ending. That's why, in the end, the fairy tale always transforms into a kid-friendly, highly Disney-esque version. At some point, Holly hands the book to Chenoweth, who instantly disappears along with Nyx. The shadowy thing appears, and from within emerges a Vito Corleone guy who is identified as Don Oberon, the fairy godfather. As it turns out, Chenoweth is an evil fairy who was manipulating the kids because of the rule that fairies cannot take things. She would only be able to get her hands on the book if someone gave it to her without asking for it. Don Oberon was trying to protect the book and is the one who really wants to turn it back to good. Nyx was aware all along of Chenoweth's evil intentions, while Snowdrop is shocked. A rift is driven between the 2 pixies, with Nyx staying with Chenoweth and Snowdrop allying with the kids and Don Oberon. Thanks for stomping your feet as you passed. That's real helpful.
Yeah.
And there has to be some sort of character development, primarily from Lucy and Kenji, the older kids, with enough from Holly that it's clear that she is our de facto protagonist. The book is taken back from Chenoweth. Snow White is saved. Her page in the book goes from tattered and scorched to pristine and golden, and all the characters return to the book. Our status quo is then established. Don Oberon guides the kids and Snowdrop from afar as they work to turn the book from evil to good, 1 page at a time, all while having to deal with the warped fairy tale characters and dodge the treachery and scheming of Chenoweth and Nyx. Conclusion? I don't know. And I am no longer reading from the blog, just an ordinary script now. And now I think I shouldn't delete the blog because there are details on it that I might forget about. Maybe I'll just make it private, like a diary, because there are spoilers on it, and I don't want spoilers for the Team Salmon ideas to exist anymore now that I'm working on actually creating them. So now that I've talked about all 7 Team Salmon ideas, whew, can't believe I've been doing this for 7 weeks. It's just flown by. Next week, I'll start actually sharing some artwork from the 7 Team Salmon series, so Stacy, if you're listening to this, I'm going to need all that artwork, like, right now, so it's ready for next week. And there's our conclusion. I'm going to Sweden in 5 days as of this recording, and in 1 day as of this podcast's publication. That's unbelievable, huh? I'd better get the hell ready. All right, see you soon.